The vast council chamber of the Zyran Empire floated high above the green clouds of their capital. World. Tall crystal windows showed the glowing rings of the planet and the steady movement of ships passing. G in formation. Inside, the great leaders of the civilization sat across from each other at a long silver table. One side wore the flowing robes of the Zyran court, decorated with threads of shining metal. The other side wore the simple but well-made uniforms of the human coalition. At the center of the Zyran side sat Princess Nira. Her golden hair shimmered under the light from the crystal ceiling, and her violet eyes carried a look of steady control. She had been trained since birth to hide emotion, but today her mind was restless. In front of her lay the formal treaty between her people and the humans. Written in both languages, it promised trade, defense, and shared exploration. It also contained one agreement that made her feel uneasy. She was to marry a human representative in order to seal the alliance. Her father, Emperor Duran, believed this marriage would bring lasting peace. Nira respected his wisdom, but her heart was heavy. She had studied humans in detail. Their history told of conflicts and rapid changes. Some called them brave and creative. Others called them unpredictable. She wondered what kind of man would be chosen for this role. On the opposite side of the table sat the human delegation. Among them was a tall man with dark brown hair and a steady gaze. His name, she had been told, was Daniel Reed. He was the appointed diplomat and the one named in the treaty as her future husband. Nira had expected someone with loud gestures or sharp arrogance. Instead, Daniel sat quietly, his posture respectful but not stiff, his eyes focused yet calm. The formal words of the treaty were spoken by the council leaders. The translators spoke in soft voices, repeating each line in both languages. Nira kept her gaze forward, but her thoughts wandered. Why would this human agree to marry someone from another world, from another species? Without hesitation, was it only duty, or was there more to it? When the meeting ended, tradition required an introduction between the betrothed. Nira rose, smoothing her long robe, and stepped forward. Daniel stood as well, meeting her halfway across the room. She noticed he did not attempt to bow deeply as Zyran men would. Instead, he placed his right hand flat against his chest and spoke in a warm, clear voice. "It is an honor to meet you, Princess Nira. I look forward to learning about your people." His words were simple. No long speech, no flattery. Nira studied him for a moment, then replied with the formal greeting of her court. "May this meeting bring understanding between us." Daniel gave a small nod, his expression unchanged. There was no sign of discomfort, but also no attempt to rush the moment. It was as if he understood that trust could not be demanded later. Nira walked through the quiet corridors of the royal ship. The walls glowed softly with the energy flowing through them. She thought of his greeting again. It was not what she had expected. He had spoken as an equal, not as someone trying to please or impress her. She did not know whether this was a sign of respect or a sign of human pride. In the following days, preparations began for the official announcement of their marriage. Both the Zyran and human media would be present. Nira attended her duties, as always, but her attention was often drawn to the human delegation. Daniel spent much of his time in discussion with trade officials and starship captains. She saw him in the council gardens one morning, speaking with a group of young cadets from both worlds. They laughed at something he said, and she noticed he listened more than he spoke. Her closest advisor, Mara, noticed her interest. "You are studying him," Mara said in a quiet voice as they walked back to the main hall. "Do you think he will be difficult?" "I do not know," Nira admitted. "He is not what I expected. He seems calm." "To calm, perhaps. Humans can surprise you," Mara replied. "They can be fierce when challenged, yet gentle when they choose to be." That evening, Nira attended a cultural exchange event in the main atrium of the ship. Zyran musicians played slow, graceful songs while human performers shared their own lively music. The two styles mixed in a way that drew curious smiles from both sides. Nira stood at the edge of the gathering, watching the blend of traditions. Daniel approached, holding two small cups of steaming tea. He offered one to her without a word. She accepted it out of courtesy. "It is from our homeworld," he said. "A simple drink. I thought you might like to try it." The tea was warm and slightly sweet. Nira took a small sip. "It was not unpleasant, thank you," she said, surprised. That he had thought to bring her something without asking for attention. Daniel nodded, then turned to watch the performers. "Your musicians have a very calm style. It feels peaceful, and yours are full of energy." She replied, "Do you prefer one over the other?" "I think they sound better together," he said with a faint smile. Nira studied his profile as he listened to the music. She still did not know if she could trust him, yet she had to admit there was something steady about him. He did not push himself into the center of attention. He did not speak as if every word were a performance. For the first time since the treaty was announced, Nira felt a small spark of curiosity instead of resistance. The evening ended with both delegations exchanging gifts. Nira gave Daniel a crystal from the mines of her homeworld, said to carry the memory of the planet's light. Daniel gave her a small carved figure of a bird from his home, crafted from wood by his grandfather. She ran her fingers over the smooth surface. It was simple, yet it carried the warmth of something made by hand. When she returned to her quarters, she set the small bird on her desk. The glow of the planet's rings shone through the window behind it. She told herself it was only a gift, nothing more. But she also knew that in the long days ahead, she would think often about the man who had given it. The next morning, the council ship moved through the quiet stretch of space between the Zyran capital and the human embassy station. The two delegations were to stop at a neutral world along the route. The visit was planned to allow the public to see both cultures together before the official ceremony. For Nira, it meant more time in the company of Daniel, and she was not sure how she felt about that. Her attendants prepared her for the day's journey. She wore a long robe in the deep blue of her family's crest, marked with thin silver lines that represented the rivers of her homeworld. As they walked toward the docking bay, Mara leaned closer and spoke softly. "You will be seen together today. The people will watch how you speak to him. Even the smallest gesture will be remembered." "I understand," Nira replied. Her voice was calm, but inside she was uneasy. She had grown up in the public eye, but this was different. This time the focus would be on her interaction with someone she barely knew. The air in the docking bay was filled with the low hum of machinery. The human transport shuttle waited for them, its silver hull polished until it reflected the bright lights above. Daniel stood near the boarding ramp, speaking with one of his officers. When he saw Nira approaching, he stepped forward. "Good morning, Princess Nira," he said in the same even tone as before. "I hope you are ready for the trip. It will be interesting," she answered, careful not to reveal too much. She could not ignore the fact that his greeting carried no sign of nerves. Many who met her for the first time tried hard to impress her. Daniel did not seem to be trying at all. They boarded the shuttle and took their seats near the front. Large viewing panels on the sides gave a clear view of space. As the vessel lifted away from the council ship, Nira noticed Daniel watching the stars pass by. He seemed at ease in the silence. After a moment, he spoke. "I read that your people believe certain star patterns bring good fortune," he said. "That is true," she replied. "Some patterns are linked to ancient stories, others guide our travels." He nodded thoughtfully. "We have something similar. Sailors on our oceans once used stars to find their way. Some of those stories are still told. For a short while, they exchanged simple facts about their worlds." Nira found the conversation less difficult than she had expected. He asked questions, but he listened more than he spoke. It was unusual. Many diplomats use conversation as a way to prove their knowledge. Daniel seemed more interested in learning. The shuttle landed smoothly on the neutral world, a place known for its markets and public gardens. Crowds gathered along the arrival path, eager to see the two figures who would soon unite their peoples. Cameras hovered silently, recording every move. Nira felt the weight of their attention, but kept her posture steady. A delegation from the local council greeted them and led them through the open square. Stalls lined the streets, displaying goods from dozens of worlds, bright fabrics, fragrant spices, and small mechanical devices were sold side by side. The air was filled with a mix of voices and scents. Daniel slowed his pace near one stall where an elderly vendor was arranging crystal orbs. One of the orbs rolled toward the edge of the table. Without hesitation, Daniel reached forward and caught it before it could fall. The vendor smiled in thanks. Nira noticed how Daniel stayed for a short exchange, asking about the origin of the crystals and listening to the old man's answer. It was a small moment, yet it showed a kind of patience she did not expect from a human diplomat. They continued through the square until they reached the public gardens. Tall trees with silver leaves lined the paths, and streams of clear water wound between patches of bright flowers. The local council leader explained that the gardens had been designed to combine features from many worlds. Some plants thrived only because of careful climate controls hidden beneath the ground. As they walked, a sudden change in the air made Nira glance upward. A storm front was moving quickly across the sky. The garden's protective shields began to hum, but one section flickered as the wind rose. A group of school children and their teacher were near the failing shield, pointing at the unusual sky. Before Nira could speak, Daniel was already moving toward them. He spoke calmly to the teacher, guiding the children toward a safer area under a covered walkway, when a branch broke from one of the trees and fell toward the path. Daniel stepped forward and pulled it aside with the help of a local guard. His movements were quick but controlled. At no point did he shout or show panic. By the time the shield stabilized, the children were safe. Daniel checked to make sure none of them were hurt. Nira had watched the whole scene in silence. She had expected a human to react with either fear or unnecessary display, but Daniel had shown neither. He returned to their group without drawing attention to what he had done. The rest of the visit passed without trouble. They attended a small reception in the garden hall, where leaders from both sides spoke of cooperation. Daniel kept his words short and focused on the value of trust. When it was time to return to the shuttle, the crowd outside had grown even larger. Some cheered, others simply watched with quiet interest. On the flight back to the council ship, Nira sat beside Daniel. Once more, the hum of the engines filled the air. After a long moment, she said, "You acted quickly in the gardens. The children were fortunate you were near." Daniel looked out at the passing stars. Anyone would have done the same. "I'm not certain that is true," she replied. "Many would have waited for guards to act." He glanced at her, a faint trace of a smile in his eyes. "Maybe. But sometimes it is better not to wait." They said little else during the trip, but Nira found her thoughts returning to the moment in the gardens. It was not just that he had helped, it was the way he had done it. No demand for thanks. No announcement of his actions. He had simply seen a need and moved to meet it. When they returned to the council ship, Nira walked to her quarters with Mara at her side. Her advisor gave her a knowing look. "You are beginning to see him differently, perhaps," Nira admitted, "but I will not decide too soon." She closed her door and stood by the window, watching the stars. The image of Daniel in the garden stayed with her. For the first time, she wondered if the treaty might mean more than duty. She wondered if the human she had feared could be something entirely unexpected. The council ship drifted in calm space as it made its slow approach toward a Zyran outpost. Near the trade routes, this stop was not part of the original plan, but the Emperor had requested it. The outpost had suffered from a series of energy malfunctions, and both human and Zyran engineers were working there together. Princess Nira was to inspect the progress, and Daniel would join her as part of their public partnership. When Nira entered the main briefing room, Daniel was already there, studying a map of the outpost's layout. Small lights marked the areas where repairs were still underway. He looked up as she approached. "Good morning, Princess," he said. "I was told the energy conduits near the central dome are still unstable." "That is correct," Nira replied. "Some of the older systems were built before our current safety standards. The repairs must be handled with care." Daniel nodded. "We will be careful." They boarded a transport shuttle and made the short flight to the outpost. As they landed, Nira noticed how the station's surface bore faint scorch marks from past malfunctions. The docking bay doors opened slowly, and a team of engineers stepped forward to greet them. The lead engineer, a Zyran named Korin, bowed deeply to Nira. "Your Highness, it is an honor. We have made progress, but there is still much to do." Korin said. Daniel shook the engineer's hand in the human manner. "I appreciate your work. If there is anything we can help with, please let us know." Korin glanced at Nira, uncertain how to respond to the offer from a diplomat. Nira gave a small nod. "You may speak freely. We are here to understand the situation." Korin led them through a wide corridor into the central dome. Inside, large panels of transparent material allowed light from the nearby star to pour in. Workers moved between the panels, adjusting tools and carrying coils of cable. The hum of machinery echoed in the air. As they reached the far side of the dome, an alarm sounded. A series of warning lights flashed red. One of the engineers shouted. From across the chamber, "Energy surge in Conduit 3. The stabilizers are not holding." Korin swore under his breath and ran toward a nearby control panel. Nira turned to Daniel, ready to order him back to safety. But he was already moving toward the problem area. Two young engineers were trying to lock the conduit into place. But the pressure was too strong. The heavy metal panel rattled dangerously. Daniel joined them without hesitation, bracing the panel with his shoulder. "Lock the top bolts first," he told one of the engineers. "I'll hold it steady." The young engineer did as instructed while the other adjusted the stabilizer's controls. The panel stopped shaking, but the heat from the conduit was intense. Daniel's uniform darkened slightly from the strain. Nira stepped closer, ready to call for more help, but Daniel signaled for her to stay back. A final turn of the stabilizer brought the readings down to safe levels, and the alarm stopped. Daniel stepped away from the conduit, wiping his hands on a cloth one of the workers offered. He gave a small nod to the engineers. "Good work." Korin approached, still catching his breath. "You should not have been that close, sir. The surge could have caused serious harm." "I saw that they needed another pair of hands," Daniel replied. "I could not just stand there." Nira studied him carefully. This was not the first time she had seen him act without concern for himself. Yet there was no hint of pride in his words. He spoke as if his actions were nothing unusual. The rest of the inspection continued without incident. Workers explained their progress and demonstrated the new safety systems. Daniel asked questions about the repairs, not as a diplomat, but as someone genuinely interested in how things worked. Nira noticed the way the workers responded to him. They spoke freely, without the stiffness they often showed in front of officials. When the tour ended, Korin escorted them back to the shuttle. Before they boarded, one of the young engineers from the earlier incident approached Daniel. "Thank you for helping us." The young man said, "I was worried we would lose the conduit." Daniel shook his head. "You did the hard part. I just kept it from falling over." As the shuttle lifted off, Nira sat quietly beside him. She thought about the moment in the dome, about how quickly he had acted and how naturally he had worked alongside the crew. Many diplomats she knew would have stepped back and let the workers handle the problem. Daniel had done the opposite. "You did not need to be there," she said finally. "You could have stayed behind the safety line." Daniel looked out at the fading view of the outpost. "Maybe, but if I had, the repair would have taken longer. And sometimes a delay can make things worse." Nira considered his words. There was a directness in his thinking that she was beginning to recognize. He did not measure every choice against personal risk. Instead, he seemed to measure it against what was needed at the moment. Back on the council ship, Mara met them at the docking bay. She listened as Nira gave a short report on the repairs. When Daniel left to speak with the human delegation, Mara turned to Nira with a faint smile. "He has earned the respect of the workers," Mara said. "That is not common for someone in his position." "It is not common," Nira agreed. "And I am beginning to see why." That night, Nira stood alone in her private chamber, looking out at the stars. The carved wooden bird Daniel had given her still sat on her desk. She picked it up, feeling the smooth lines beneath her fingers. It reminded her of the way he had held the conduit in place steady. Without hesitation, she realized she was no longer only curious about him. She wanted to understand the reason behind his actions, the values that guided him, for the first time since the treaty had been proposed. She wondered if the alliance might be built on more than politics. Perhaps it could be built on the kind of trust that came from standing together when it mattered most. The message came in the early hours of the ship's morning cycle. A colony on the edge of Zyran territory had been struck by a sudden seismic event. The tremor had damaged homes, storage buildings, and parts of the power grid. Though the colony was small, it served as an important hub for trade between Zyran and human merchants. The council decided that Princess Nira and Daniel should travel there together, both to oversee relief efforts and to show unity between their peoples. When Nira entered the shuttle bay, she found Daniel already speaking with the flight crew. He wore a practical jacket instead of his usual formal uniform, and a small pack rested over his shoulder. "You seem ready for the day," she said. He turned with a slight smile. "I was told we may be moving supplies, so I came prepared." The shuttle lifted from the council ship and turned toward the outer sectors. Through the wide front window, the stars stretched into long lines as they entered faster than light travel. The journey was quiet at first, broken only by short updates from the pilot. Nira reviewed the damage reports on her console while Daniel read through the same files. "They lost a lot of their food storage," Daniel said after a while. "That will be just as serious as the power failure." "Yes," Nira agreed. "The colony is self-sufficient for the most part, but if the harvest was stored there, they will need shipments from other worlds by the time they dropped out." A faster-than-light travel, the colony's pale blue world filled the view ahead. The shuttle descended toward a landing platform beside the main settlement. From above, Nira could see rows of simple houses and low buildings. Some had collapsed walls or cracked roofs. People moved quickly through the streets, carrying crates and tools. The colony leader, a broad-shouldered man named Davin, greeted them with a short bow. "Your Highness, Ambassador Reed, thank you for coming. We have the main shelter stable, but there is still much to repair. Show us where we can help," Daniel said without hesitation. They followed Davin through the settlement. The air was cool, carrying the scent of freshly turned soil from the damaged fields. In the central square, a group of colonists worked to repair a water pump. Others stacked crates of supplies under a temporary canopy. A line of children and their parents waited near a medical tent, where a mix of human and Zyran doctors moved. Between patients, Nira stopped to speak with the doctors, asking what they needed most. Daniel, however, walked straight to the damaged houses. A team of colonists struggled to lift a heavy support beam into place. Daniel set down his pack, rolled up his sleeves, and joined them without asking for permission. "Lift on my count," he said, gripping the beam alongside to other men. 1, 2, 3. With combined effort, the beam rose high enough for another worker to secure it. Once it was locked into place, Daniel stepped back, brushing dust from his hands. The colonists thanked him, but he simply nodded and moved to the next task. Nira watched from a short distance. She had expected him to observe and perhaps give advice. Instead, he worked like any other laborer, carrying crates, moving debris, and listening when the colonists explained what they needed. In the afternoon, they joined a group repairing the damaged storage building. Inside, sacks of grain had split open, spilling across the floor. Daniel helped gather what could be saved, then organized a line of volunteers to move the rest to a dry shelter. He worked steadily, speaking to everyone as if they were equals. The colonists responded with open trust. Later, Nira walked beside him toward the outer fields, where cracks in the ground threatened the irrigation channels. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the land. "You do not act like a diplomat," she said. Daniel glanced at her. And how should a diplomat act? Most would have stood beside the colony leader, giving words of encouragement while the workers did the heavy tasks. "I think encouragement means more when you are willing to work beside them," he replied. They reached a break in the channel where water pooled against a fallen barrier. Daniel joined the group of workers lifting the barrier back into place. When the flow was restored, one of the older farmers approached Nira. "Your human friend is strong," the farmer said. and he listens. That is rare. Nira gave a small smile. Yes, it is. By evening, the settlement's power was partially restored, and temporary shelters stood where houses had been damaged beyond repair. The colonists gathered in the central square to share a simple meal of bread, fruit, and roasted vegetables. Nira and Daniel sat among them. Children ran between the tables, and laughter mixed with the hum of generators in the distance died as the meal ended. David rose to speak. Today we saw what this alliance can mean. Not just leaders in distant halls, but hands ready to work together when it matters. The crowd gave a quiet cheer. Nira noticed several people looking at Daniel with respect. She also noticed how he seemed slightly uncomfortable with the attention, as if he preferred the work to the recognition. Later, as they prepared to leave, Nira stood beside Daniel at the edge of the landing platform. The stars were just beginning to appear above the horizon. You have made an impression here, she said. He shook his head. The people here did the hard work. I was only helping. You say that often, she replied. But I think you do not see the way people respond to you. They trust you quickly. That is not a common gift. Daniel looked out at the settlement below. Maybe trust is built faster when people see that you are willing to share their burdens. As the shuttle lifted off, Nira found herself considering his words. She had always believed that trust was earned through long negotiations, careful promises, and measured steps. Daniel showed another path, one that was simple but powerful. It was not about speeches or titles. It was about standing beside others in their need. She sat back in her seat and glanced at him. His gaze was on the view outside, calm as always. Yet she sensed there was more to him than he revealed. The journey to understand him, she realized, was only beginning. The shuttle returned to the council ship late in the day, but Nira could not rest. The images of the colony stayed in her mind, the cracked walls, the worried faces, and the way Daniel had worked among them as if he had always been part of their community. She had seen leaders speak of unity before, but she had rarely seen one live it with such ease. 2 days later, the ship made a planned stop at a small moon station for refueling. The moon circled a quiet green world, and its surface was covered in soft silver dust. Nira had visited the station once before and remembered the observation terrace that looked out over the planet below. After the official meetings were finished, she decided to visit it again. To her surprise, Daniel was already there when she arrived. He stood near the edge of the glass wall, hands resting on the railing, watching the world turn slowly below. The soft light from the planet cast a pale glow on his face. I did not expect to see you here, she said as she stepped onto the terrace. He turned slightly. I like quiet places. They help me think. Nira moved to stand beside him. The view was peaceful. The planet's clouds drifted like slow-moving rivers, and its seas reflected the light of the moon. You think often, she said. He gave a small smile. I try to. It keeps me from making mistakes. For a while they stood in silence, watching the stars appear one by one. Then Nira spoke again. I want to ask you something. When you helped the colony, why did you work so hard? You could have done less and still been thanked. Daniel looked at her, his expression thoughtful. I do not see it that way. My people have a saying, kindness is a form of strength. Anyone can give orders or make promises. But when you show you are willing to help, it changes how people see you. Nira considered his words. In the Zion court, we are taught that showing need or effort can be seen as weakness. I think it depends on what kind of strength you want to show, Daniel replied. If your goal is to rule by fear, then yes, you hide your effort. But if your goal is to build trust, you cannot hide it. People need to see it. The soft hum of the station's systems filled the quiet between them. Nira's gaze drifted back to the planet. I have seen many leaders who spoke of trust but acted only for themselves. You are not like them. I hope not, he said. I have made mistakes, but I try to learn from them. A faint breeze moved through the terrace as the climate controls adjusted. Nira felt a small warmth in her chest. She had not expected this conversation to feel so steady. There was no game in his words, no attempt to control the direction. He spoke as if he trusted her enough to be honest. They walked along the length of the terrace. The curved glass gave them a changing view of the stars, the planet, and the surface of the moon below. Nira told him about her homeworld's great rivers, how they had shaped the cities and the culture of her people. Daniel listened carefully, asking questions about the seasons, the trade routes, and the traditions tied to the war-dotted return. He spoke of his own homeworld with wide plains and changing skies. He described the sound of rain on the roof of his family's house, the long walks he used to take on quiet evenings, and the way the stars seemed brighter when seen from open fields. His voice carried a calmness that made the images feel real to her. They stopped near a bench facing the open view. Nira sat, and Daniel joined her for a moment. Neither spoke. The distant planet's glow painted the glass with soft colors. "You?" "No," Nira said at last. "When I learned of the treaty, I thought this marriage would be a prison. I feared I would be tied to someone who cared nothing for me or my people. And now?" Daniel asked gently. She hesitated. "Now I am less certain of that fear. You have acted with respect and without demand. It is not what I expected." He looked at her steadily. "If we are to be partners in this alliance, I want it to be by choice, not by force. I would rather earn your trust than take it because of a treaty." Something in her chest shifted at his words. She had spent years surrounded by people who measured their actions for advantage. This man, from a world she had once distrusted, spoke as if trust was the only advantage worth having. The station's lights dimmed slightly, marking the change to the night cycle. Stars filled the darkness outside, brighter now without the glare of the planet's day side. Nira felt the quiet settle over them, but it was not uncomfortable. "Do you believe," she asked, "that kindness can survive in politics?" "I believe it is the only thing that makes politics worth doing," he answered. "Without it, all you have is power for its own sake." Nira found herself studying him, not as a potential political partner, but as a man who lived by his words. She realized she wanted to know more, not just about his world or his people, but about the small details of his life, the choices that had shaped him. When they left the terrace, the station's corridors were nearly empty. Their footsteps echoed softly as they walked back to the shuttle bay. Neither of them spoke much, but the silence felt different now. It carried a quiet understanding, a sense that something had shifted between them. Back on the council ship, Nira returned to her quarters. She paused by her desk, where the small wooden bird still rested. She touched it lightly, remembering the sound of Daniel's voice as he spoke about trust. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future where this marriage might not be only duty. Perhaps it could be a choice, hers as much as his. The council ship drifted between the stars, its silver hull catching the faint light of a distant sun. Inside, the usual rhythm of meetings, reports, and quiet corridors filled the days. Nira found herself thinking often of the conversation on the moon station. Daniel's words still echoed in her mind, and though she told herself she was only considering them as part of her duty, she knew there was more to it. 3 days after leaving the station, the comm was broken. It began with a sharp tone from the ship's alert system. The steady hum of the engines was joined by the rising pitch of warning sirens. Nira, seated in her quarters reading a diplomatic report, stood at once. A voice came through the communicator. "All council members, secure positions. We have incoming vessels approaching at high speed." Nira left her quarters quickly. In the corridor, she found Daniel already heading toward the command deck, his steps steady despite the alarms. "What is it?" she asked as they walked. "Raiders," he said. "The outer scanners picked them up. They are not answering hails." On the command deck, the air was tense. Screens showed the black void dotted with distant stars and 3 fast-moving ships closing in. The captain, a calm and efficient Zyran officer, gave orders to prepare defensive shields. "These ships are armed," the captain said. "They will reach firing range in 3 minutes." Nira's first thought was the safety of the crew. Her second was the risk to the council's mission. The raiders were known to target political vessels for ransom. If captured, their alliance negotiations could be endangered. Daniel moved to the tactical station without waiting for permission. "I know their pattern," he said. "These are scavenger-class ships. They will try to disable engines first. We need to strengthen the rear shields. The captain looked at him briefly, then nodded. Do it? The deck crew worked quickly. Nira watched Daniel as he coordinated with the ship's defense officer, calling out shield adjustments and energy transfers. His focus was complete, his tone calm but firm. The raiders closed in. A sudden burst of red light streaked toward the council ship. The impact shook the deck, and the shields flared with energy. Rear shields holding, the defense officer reported. Daniel gave quick instructions for a counter move. The ship shifted position, angling to protect its most vulnerable systems. Another volley struck, but again the shields absorbed it. Can we outmaneuver them? Nira asked. Daniel shook his head. They have speed, but not endurance. If we can last long enough, they will retreat. The battle dragged on for minutes that felt much longer. Each impact sent a tremor through the ship. Crew members kept their focus, but the strain was visible. Then the scanners showed one of the raider ships breaking formation. It veered to the side, circling to attack from an angle. The shields did not fully cover. They will target the life support systems, Daniel said. If they succeed, the rest of the fight will not matter. Before the captain could answer, Daniel turned to Nira. I need to go to the auxiliary controls. We can reroute shield energy manually from there. Nira hesitated. It is on the lower decks. That area may be hit. I know, Daniel said simply. But if we stay here, we cannot protect that side in time. She saw no false bravery in his eyes, only determination. Go, she said. Daniel left quickly, taking a small team with him. Nira remained on the deck, watching the sensors. The raider ship drew closer to the unshielded side. For a moment, she feared they would be too late. Then the shield readings spiked. Daniel's voice came through the communicator. Auxiliary controls active. Energy rerouted. The side is covered. The raider ship fired, but the new shield line held. The impact was bright and harmless against the barrier. The crew cheered. Softly, relief mixing with focus. With their main tactic blocked, the raiders began to falter. Their shots grew less frequent, and after a final exchange, they turned away. The scanners tracked them as they jumped to faster-than-light speed, vanishing into the dark. The alarms faded. The captain gave orders to check for damage and treat any injured crew. Nira left the command deck and made her way to the lower levels. She found Daniel near the auxiliary station, speaking with a technician. His uniform was marked with dust from a small panel explosion, but he seemed unharmed. You did it, she said. He gave a small nod. We all did it. You could have been injured. That is true, he said, but the risk was worth it. Nira studied him, the sound of the battle still in her memory. You did not hesitate. I did not think in those moments, Daniel said. I just act for what will help everyone. The technician confirmed that the systems were stable. The shield reroute would hold until the main controls were repaired. Daniel turned back to Nira. This is what an alliance means, he said. We protect each other, no matter who is in danger. Nira felt something shift again within her. She had seen leaders protect themselves first. But Daniel had gone directly toward the risk to protect the whole crew. His actions had been without calculation, without thought of how it might look in the council's records. They walked together back toward the upper decks. The corridors were calmer now, with crew members working to secure panels and clear debris. Some paused to thank Daniel, and each time he accepted it with a brief word before moving on. In the quiet that followed, Nira realized her earlier doubts about him had grown faint. She still carried her sense of duty, but now it was joined by a respect she could not ignore. When they reached her quarters, she paused. Thank you, Daniel. Not just for saving the ship, for showing me the meaning of this alliance. He met her gaze. It is not just a treaty, it is people. That is what makes it worth keeping. That night, Nira looked out her window at the endless stars. She thought of the battle, of the quick decisions, and the steady courage she had witnessed. For the first time, she imagined a future not only where this marriage succeeded for the council's sake, but where she might choose it for her own. The days after the battle passed quietly. The council ship continued its journey toward the central meeting station. where the alliance ceremony would take place. Repairs were completed, reports were sent, and the crew slowly returned to routine. But for Nira, the days were filled with thought. She had seen many acts of leadership during her life. She had heard speeches, read treaties, and studied diplomacy since she was young. But what she had seen in Daniel during the battle had been different. There had been no speech, no preparation, only action. He had risked himself for the safety of all without a moment of hesitation. One evening, Nira stood on the observation deck, looking out at the field of stars. The glass wall stretched high above her, and the silence was deep. She thought of her homeworld and how far she had come. She thought of the fear she had carried for months. At the idea of marrying a human, that fear had once felt like an unshakable truth. Now it felt like a shadow slowly fading in the light. Daniel entered the deck quietly. He stopped a short distance away, letting her notice him before speaking. "You seem deep in thought." "I am," she said. "The meeting is soon." "Yes," he agreed. "After the ceremony, everything will change for our people." Nira turned to him. "It will change for us as well." They stood in silence. For a moment, the distant stars glittered like scattered silver. Finally, Nira spoke again. "When I first learned of this arrangement, I thought only of the risk. I imagined that we would act as strangers bound by duty, nothing more. And now," Daniel asked, "now," she said slowly, "I see the risk in another way. The risk is not in joining with someone from another world. The risk is in ignoring what is in front of me." Daniel studied her, not pushing for more. Nira continued, "You have shown me kindness when it was not required. You have acted with honor when no one demanded it. You have protected those who were not your own people as if they were. I have seen enough to trust you." He nodded, his expression calm, but his eyes warm. "I am glad to hear that. Trust is the strongest bond we can have." They were called to the main hall the next morning. The central station was vast, a great sphere in space with docking bays for hundreds of ships. Representatives from many worlds gathered for the Alliance event. The hall was filled with banners, lights, and the quiet hum of many voices. The ceremony was simple in form but heavy with meaning. The council leaders spoke of unity, shared strength, and mutual respect. Nira and Daniel stood together at the front, representing their worlds. As part of the tradition, each was to place a hand on the Alliance stone, a smooth crystal that glowed softly when touched by two who entered a pact of peace. It was more symbol than tool, but the act carried weight in the eyes of every attendee. When the moment came, Nira stepped forward first. She looked at Daniel, and he stepped forward beside her. Their hands touched the cool surface of the stone at the same time. A pale light rose within them. Crystal. It spread upward until the whole stone glowed with a steady, living brightness round them. The hall filled with a gentle sound like distant chimes. The light was not the work of machines. It was an old relic, a gift from a forgotten age, responding to the presence of two who truly meant their bond. Nira's breath caught. She had touched the stone in other ceremonies for lesser treaties, and never had it shone so bright. She looked at Daniel. He said nothing, but she saw in his eyes the same understanding. The council leader declared the alliance sealed. Applause filled the hall. The banners seemed to sway slightly in the air currents. From the great vents above, delegates stepped forward to offer congratulations. When the hall grew less crowded, Nira and Daniel stood together near one of the high windows that looked out at the curve of the station and the black beyond. For the first time, the space between them felt natural, unforced. "Our worlds will speak of this day for generations," Daniel said. "They will," Nira agreed. "But I hope they will remember more than the treaty." "What else should they remember?" he asked. "That there was trust," she said. "That there was choice." Daniel smiled faintly. "And this was your choice?" "It was," she said. "Not because of duty, but because of who you are." They left the hall together and walked along the quiet corridor that led to the docking ring. Nira thought of the path ahead. There would be challenges. Not all would accept this alliance easily, but she no longer feared the journey back on their ship. The crew prepared for the return voyage as they lifted from the station. The stars opened before them once again. Nira took her place at the command deck for departure, with Daniel at her side. The hum of the engines rose, and the ship glided forward into the dark. Yet to Nira, the dark no longer felt empty. It felt like a space full of possibilities. She looked at Daniel, who was checking the navigation. "We're to first, wherever the Alliance needs us," he said, "and after that, wherever we decide." The ship slipped into faster-than-light speed. The stars stretched into bright lines, then softened into a field of shifting light. For Nira, it was not just the start of a new mission. It was the start of something she had once thought impossible. A shared life with someone she now trusted completely. And as the council ship carried them onward, the future no longer seemed uncertain. It seemed wide, open, and bright.